When I was about 16, and I'd just gotten my license, I had a fun little experience, kind of peeved my parents a little bit. You see, I went out with my friend Tyler, and Tyler actually, by most accounts anyways, was exactly the kind of person that a parent wants their kids to hang out with. He was from church, he was in the worship group, he was involved in the youth group, he was kind, he didn't curse, didn't drink, didn't smoke, he was actually a really good kid. But Tyler really enjoyed getting me in trouble. It was like his favorite thing. It was almost like having another older brother. He just really enjoyed talking me into things and getting me in trouble. So I went out with Tyler, I met up with him about 7 or 8 at night, and we hung out just eating pizza, drinking soda, watching YouTube videos, nothing nefarious. We were actually hanging out in the church since he was in the worship group, and actually so was I. We had keys to the church, so we hung out in the youth room. We took advantage of their projector, and we just kind of watched stupid videos and hung out. Around 11 o'clock, 11:30, I looked at him and I said, "Hey, I have to be home by 12. I know it's a weekend and everything, but I got to get going soon." He said, "All right, that's fine. Just one more video." And I said, "Okay, cool." So we watched another YouTube video. 12 o'clock rolled around and I said, "Oh man, I should have left a few minutes ago. I'm going to be late. I'm going to break curfew. I got to go." And he goes, "Oh, well, you're already breaking curfew, so you could stay a few more minutes." This kept happening over and over again until it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. We were still there. I was supposed to be home 3 hours ago. Somewhere around 1 a.m., I stopped answering my parents' text messages because I was scared of what they'd say. On my ride home, I picked up my phone, and I know you're not supposed to text and drive, but I was 16 and I made bad choices. And I looked at my phone, and I realized I had about 15 missed text messages and about 5 missed calls from both of my parents. When I got home, my dad was already in bed, and my mom was asleep on the couch. I thought I could maybe sneak by her and, say, "Oh, I got home at like 1:30, and that's not as bad as 3, right?" So I could kind of tell her, "Oh yeah, I totally got home earlier. You just already fallen asleep." But as I walked by her, I heard my mom kind of stir and get up, and she looked at me, and she said, "Oh, your dad is so angry at you." And that's like the last words that a 16-year-old that just broke the rules wants to hear. "Oh, your dad is so mad at you." I thought, okay, I'm sorry. I'll talk to him tomorrow. And I kind of slinked off to bed, and Mom got up and went to her bed. In the morning, I did have a conversation with my dad, and I was grounded from using my car for, I think, 2 weeks. It wasn't just, "Oh, hey, by the way, you're grounded." It was a very unpleasant conversation. There was a little bit of voice raising. There was a little bit of being upset, especially on my father's part. He was not happy with me. And the reason why I tell you this story is to illustrate a point to you, that no matter how minor it is, every family has conflict. Every single one. Because you have kids that break rules because they don't understand the rules, or like me, they just chose to ignore them. You have parents who become disappointed in their children and maybe don't know how to handle what their children have done. You have spouses that fight because they have different expectations or because someone honestly just messed up. You have tension, you have conflict in every family, no matter how perfect. You see, families and family members have rules and expectations. And when expectations aren't met or when rules are broken, people get disappointed, hurt, angry. There is tension, there is worry, and yes, there is anxiety. Your family isn't perfect, and neither is mine. So what is God's battle plan for your imperfect family? How is God going to address the worry, the tension, and the anxiety created by your imperfect family and by mine? I think in order to answer that question, we need to take a step back a couple centuries to the world that the Bible was written in. We have to understand what a family in those days looked like. And then we can examine something that Paul wrote to us and wrote to them, understand what he meant, and we can come up with a solution to the anxiety and tension and conflict in your imperfect family. So take a step back with me. In the first century, the typical Roman family looked something like this. First of all, there was a father. And the father was the patriarch. He was the ruler of the family. He had complete and utter control of the family's business, of where they went, of who they spoke to, of the way they behaved inside and outside of the house. He had complete control. And I don't just mean he had honorary control, like people willingly listened to him. No, under Roman law, a husband, a patriarch, the man of the family, could divorce his wife for any reason if he didn't choose to kill her. He could disown his children, or he could kill them as well. You see, his wife and his children were seen as his property, not as people. You take a step back from the father, and the second in command, although it was a distant second, would have been the wife, the woman of the family. She was a second-class citizen because she was seen as his property, something that he owned, something that he controlled, but she did still have authority over the children. She could decide where they went, how they behaved, what they did, who taught them. She could rule the house when the husband wasn't home. She was the second in command, as it were. And then another step back from her, and you run into the children. And the children, at least until the age when they could begin work, were seen as useless, as parasites, as something that you'd really rather not have, but you know it'll pay off further down the line. At best, children were seen as investments. Because once they got to 12 or 13, they could start picking up some real work, help you out on the farm, help you with your business. Once they got older, if you're a richer family, you could marry them off for influence and money. Children were in many ways third-rate citizens or fourth-rate citizens, just barely a step above the slaves if the family had any. That's the structure of a normal Roman family in this period. And Paul sees this, and this doesn't look like something that Jesus would embrace. This doesn't look like something that God would want. People being treated as though they were not human. People being abused, their lives being at the mercy of a potentially horrid dictator. So what can Paul say to that ancient Roman family? In fact, what can Paul say to us? See, we don't look like that Roman family. In fact, we look pretty different. In a lot of ways, I think anyways, we look a whole lot better. But just like there's tension, just like there's conflict, just like there's difficulties in the Roman family where the father ruled with an iron fist, there's also tension in our modern families today. Not the same kind of tension, but there's still tension. Because we have expectations, we have rules, both spoken and unspoken, that are broken. Expectations that aren't satisfied. Our families aren't perfect either. Like, who will handle finances? That's something that spouses disagree on. Who's going to handle the finances? Is it whoever pays or whoever makes more? Is it whoever is a little bit better with money? Do we make those decisions together? Or what about this? Why won't your children listen to the rules? Why did your son stay out till 3 a.m. when his curfew was clearly 12? Or kids, maybe your question is, well, why do my parents have so many stupid rules that I wish I didn't have to listen to? What about who does the laundry? What about, well, why would she spend that much money on clothes? Or ladies, maybe it's, well, why would he spend that much time watching football when he should be helping out around the house? We have expectations, we have questions, we have rules, both spoken and unspoken, that simply are not satisfied. But I think that Paul gives us an answer, or a little bit of a hint of how to answer these questions and expectations in Colossians chapter 3. Starting in verse 18, the text reads, "Wives, submit yourselves to your husbands, as is fitting to the Lord." Verse 19, "Husbands, love your wives, and do not be harsh with them." Now I know some of you heard that text, and you went, oh no, we're not talking about this today. And you started moving your mouse to click out of this video, but please just give me a second. I know the others of you, when you heard that first line, "Wives, submit to your husbands," you started smiling and nodding. And that's probably not a great reaction either, honestly. You see, Paul's actually saying something a little bit different than I think the way we normally read this passage. He's actually asserting that husbands and wives should serve one another. That spouses must mutually love and respect one another. That spouses should that each spouse should do their job to reduce tension and anxiety in the family. This is a text about love and submission. And it's not just one-sided. Let's start off with that first one. Wives, submit to your husbands. You see, when we hear the word submit, we have a picture of someone who's weak, someone who's groveling, someone who has no other option other than to serve someone stronger than them. But the word that Paul uses here is hypotasso, which actually refers to someone who is a powerful, independent person, someone who has free will, and they willingly, of their own accord, decide that they are going to put themselves in a place of service to another individual. They are going to willingly serve someone else. Paul says, wives, even though you are independent, beautiful creatures of God, created in God's own image, despite that, I am asking you to do something very self-sacrificial, asking you to do something very loving. You should serve your husbands. And then he turns around and he speaks to husbands and he says, husbands, love your wives. And that word love is one of 4 different words in Greek we have for love. The one here is agapao. And agapao, well, it's not a fuzzy feeling in your heart. It's not a sexual love either. Actually, agapao means to place someone else's interests before your own. It's the kind of love that acts. It's the kind of love that does. It's the kind of love that looks at someone else and says what you need and what you want is more important than what I need and what I want. Husbands should love their wives. You see, both of these commands, they're actually commands to serve. Commands to submit, commands to love. In fact, if we read other texts and we realize that all Christians are called to submit and serve. In Ephesians 5:21, we see that all Christians should submit to one another. Paul says, submit to one another regardless of gender. He doesn't say wives or husbands. He simply says all Christians should submit to one another. In other verses, we're told to love one another. We understand that's not a gendered command. All Christians should love. All Christians should submit. But Paul is emphasizing something here to wives and husbands, which is that you need to serve your spouse. See, in many ways, a husband-wife relationship, it's a submission competition. That's actually what Andy Stanley calls it. If you don't know the guy, look him up. He's amazing. Marriage is a submission competition, and what does that look like for us? Well, I'll tell you what it looked like for me, or what it should have looked like. A couple days ago, as many of you know, Maggie and I spent all day over the weekend on Saturday repairing some old broken down, rusted up bikes. And there was one specific part to one of the seats that I thought, we'll just use the old one. We don't need a new one. So when we bought a new seat, we got an extra part. I thought, okay, we'll put it on the shelf, and if I need it later, I'll have it. Maggie thought, we don't need it, so I may as well just throw it away. We did not converse about this. We just kind of made our own decisions and didn't say anything. So when Maggie saw the part laying around, she just threw it away. When I realized she had thrown it away, when I realized that I needed it about 2 days later, I looked at her and I said, Maggie, why would you throw that away? What's wrong with you? I was going to save it. We didn't know if the old part was going to work. Why would you do that? And she said, because I just thought we didn't need it. I figured I could just throw it away. It wouldn't be a big deal. And honestly, I raised my voice a little bit more than I should have. I should have just walked up to her and said, hey, I should have communicated this to you. You know, this is really unfortunate. Do you think we can get the part out of the trash? Whatever. But no, instead I raised my voice. And Maggie looked at me and she said, fine, I'll go find it. And she walked out of the house to go look through the trash and see if she could find the part. And as soon as she left the building, I thought, I messed up. Because she'll come back with or without that part, and she'll think, man, why did my husband have to talk to me like that? She'll think, why was this such a big deal? Why did he raise his voice? Why couldn't we just talk about this calmly? Why didn't he come with me to look for that? Why did he send me dumpster diving on my own? I knew that as soon as she walked out of the house. So when she came back, she actually had the part in her hand and she set it down. She didn't say anything because frankly, she's a lot calmer than I am. And I walked up to her and I said, I'm so sorry. I should have handled that differently. I should have just walked up to you calmly. I should have said, hey, do you know what happened to this part here? Let me help you find it. Just point me in the right direction. I should have started off with a, I love you and I'm not angry. I never should have raised my voice. Maybe for some of you, turning your marriage into a submission competition looks a little bit more like helping out around the house. Just picking up a few chores that they aren't the ones you normally do, but you're just trying to help. Or maybe for some of you, your spouse has that one hobby, that one activity that really you hate. Maybe your husband just loves going to car shows. Maybe your wife just really enjoys sitting out on the porch and reading. And maybe every time they do that, they ask you to join. They say, hey, you want to come to this car show with me? Hey, you want to sit out on the porch and read with me? And you always say no because that's just not your thing. Maybe turning marriage into a submission competition looks a little bit like embracing their hobbies because you appreciate how much time they want to spend with you. Paul doesn't stop with husbands and wives. Actually, he moves on in verses 20 and 21, and he talks about parents and children as well. You see, parents and children have their jobs too. The service looks a little bit different. Love looks a little different in that relationship, but service and love are still key. Putting the other person first is still key. In verse 20, Paul writes, "Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not embitter your children, or they will become discouraged." Again, both should love. Both should submit. Both should serve. Children, maybe it looks a little like this. Your parents have that one rule that you just hate. Maybe it's you can't be on your phone past 8 o'clock. Maybe it's even though you're 17 and you can drive and you have your own car and you even paid for it, they tell you you have to be home by 10 every night. And you think, I don't get why this is such a big deal. I don't understand. Why should I have to do that? But Paul doesn't say, children, obey your parents when you might get in trouble. He doesn't say, children, obey your parents when you feel like it. He doesn't say, children, obey your parents when they're watching. He just says, children, obey your parents. Why? Because that obedience is an act of love. Maybe your parents have that rule that you don't get it, your friends don't get it, and even your parents can't explain to you why it's important. But you disobeying that rule, you decide, you know what, I'm staying out till 11 even though my parents don't want me to. Hey, I'm going to ignore my parents' text at 1 o'clock and show up at 3 a.m. Maybe that's not the best way to show love and submission in your relationship with them. What Paul is saying here is that in your imperfect family, in your tension-filled family, if it's anything like everyone else's, your role, the way that you show love and submission is to obey. When he says, fathers, do not embitter your children, first of all, I want to acknowledge I'm not a father yet. When I'm speaking on this, I am really more speaking from the perspective of a child than I am from the perspective of a parent, so I want to acknowledge that. But maybe, just maybe, Paul's command here, do not embitter your children, doesn't require that much interpretation anyway. You see, Paul tells fathers, and honestly, we could apply this to fathers or mothers, whoever's disciplining the children, whoever's interacting with their kids, it doesn't matter whether you're a father or mother. This is a pretty good piece of advice for you. Do not embitter your children. That word there might mean rouse to fight, to make angry. What does it look like when you enforce the rules for your kid? Now, trust me, punishments are necessary. I'm closer to being a kid than being a dad, probably, but I understand that rules are important. The rules have to be enforced, but what does it look like when you enforce those rules? Do you enforce the rules out of anger? When your kid lies, do you punish them because you're mad at them, or do you punish them because you're trying to teach them a lesson? Paul says, don't do something out of anger. Don't embitter your children. Don't make them angry. Don't make them want to fight. Rather, when you discipline your kids, do it in a way that builds them. If they get caught lying, explain to them, I'm not punishing you because I'm mad at you. I'm not punishing you because I hate you or I'm disappointed in you. I'm punishing you because I need to teach you a lesson. That lying is unacceptable regardless of age. If your kid breaks curfew, then explain to them, hey, I'm not taking your car away just because I really wish that you had gotten home sooner because it makes me happy. No, I'm taking your car away because you need to understand that rules exist for a reason, that they're meant to keep you safe. That communication would have been better, that maybe we could have extended your curfew if you'd just talked to me first. Do not embitter your children. Do not anger your children. You see, just like the relationship between husbands and wives, the relationship between parents and children is all about submission. In fact, all of family life is a submission competition. Hey guys, if you enjoyed the sermon, if you were moved by it, then please don't let this moment pass you by. Contact us. You can email us at info@bereanconnect.com. You can call the church offices. The number is on our website. And while you're at it, follow us on Facebook, follow us on YouTube, like this video wherever you see it. It really helps us to get the message out there and to connect with more people. We can't wait to hear from you. Thank you for joining us today, and we can't wait to see you again. Bye.